Hello everyone, please press subscribe, press follow, press the bell so you don't miss any new clips. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Author by Flying Alone. Audio novels by novelist. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 131. Breaking into the Forbidden Area. Anyone else not convinced? Ling Han stopped moving, and smiled at the others. Everyone else shook their heads. This guy was really too fierce. Anyone who was not in Gushing Spring Tier was completely unqualified to come to blows with Ling Han. The few Gushing Spring Tier martial artists gave a humph. They had no fear of Ling Han, yet they dreaded facing Lu Yutong. Currently, Lu Yutong had her sword in hand and was standing guard by Ling Han's side, so no one dared to make any reckless moves. Most importantly, they did not have the time to bother with Ling Han right now. That stalk of spiritual medicine had escaped into the mysterious zone, so the most important thing now was how they were going to tempt it out of there. More and more people poured out to surround this area on all sides. This was probably the central zone of the whole underground space. It was circular in shape, and occupied quite a large area. Most importantly, that dark area seemed to be swallowing all of the surrounding light as if it was a solid object, capable of blocking their sight. A person standing at one end would not be able to see the other end at all. Thankfully, there were enough people who had entered here, and could somewhat ensure that this area was completely surrounded. At least, if that stalk of godly medicine ventured out, they would know instantly. What now? After they had formed a circle around the dark area, everyone asked awkwardly. Make sure it's trapped. I don't believe it's never coming back out. Someone said. Are you stupid? That is a plant. It can completely dig its roots inside for a few years to a few hundred years, but what about us? We would have to leave after 3 days, at most. Another person rebuked. Oh, right. The person who had spoken earlier said with a bit of embarrassment. Everyone was frowning in thought. That was definitely a stalk of spiritual medicine and may have even reached the legendary godly level, yet they could only stand here and watch. This feeling was really about to drive them crazy. Some of them left to inform the old monsters waiting outside the opening, hoping that they could have some idea about what to do, while the others continued to stand guard here. Ling Han slowly neared that invisible wall. He stretched out a hand to feel it. A very familiar feeling. A sliver of a smile turned up the corners of Ling Han's lips. Years ago, he had ventured to a lot of ancient historical sites and had witnessed a lot of similar situations. That was also why he had shouted out the warning earlier on. This was not a wall, but an aura field that was at a level above Heaven Tier. If he was still in Heaven Tier, then based on the studies he had done on this kind of aura field, he could break through it by force and allow himself to pass through, but now he was completely unqualified to attempt that kind of thing. Could it be that he would have to use that? Ling Han took out the damaged saber. This was his disciple's treasured saber, and could also possibly be the only remnant of his disciple that he would be able to find. If he used all the remaining might of the spiritual tool in a single explosive burst, he should be able to forcibly use the power on par with Heaven Tier. But the problem was, such an explosive burst would also mean the complete end of this treasured saber. Ling Han hesitated. Moreover, there was another problem. This treasured saber could only explode with such power once, so after he entered, how was he going to get back out? But after a short moment, he finally made his decision. He had to go in. Because there was not only the godly medicine inside. The secret behind that great battle years ago should also be hidden there, and he wanted to find out the reason for that battle. Moreover, if there was really the corpse of an ultimate warrior of shattering void tier inside that had formed this aura field, then who knows, he may have a way to disperse this aura field. You two, cover for me, Ling Han said to Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan. As this area was very big, everyone was standing about 10 meters apart from each other to completely surround this area. Thus, Ling Han was standing in between the two girls. It would not be very easy for the people standing at the other side of the two girls to notice him there if they weren't paying attention. The two girls did not know what he intended to do, but they both nodded, because they knew that this guy had the ability to achieve the impossible. Ling Han began to revive the treasured saber. Jiang Yue Feng's martial intent originated from him, and though he was extremely weak at the moment, their martial arts were of the same vein. With the stimulation of his divine sense, the martial intent engraved in the treasured saber began to awaken. When the seals on the treasured saber began to light up one by one, shining brightly. However, this was the last light that would be coming from it. Soon, it would become completely ordinary, like any other normal weapon. Ling Han did not have the slightest bit of hesitation. He used the treasured saber to pierce through the aura field to open up a path for himself. Even so, he was still in a very emotionally tense state. The treasured saber in his hand was shaking as if it was a fish out of water, and even his body was shaking along with it from the force of its quivering, so much that he was forced to walk in a zigzag pattern. His figure instantly disappeared into the dark area, and could no longer be seen. Lu Yutong and Li Xichan were both dumbstruck with shock. They exchanged a look with each other, and in the other's eyes, they could both see deep astonishment, as well as strong admiration. Was there anything that this youth, no, this man, could not do? They quickly withdrew their gazes and became alert, focusing on the task of covering for Ling Han to ensure that no one would notice that he had disappeared. Otherwise, even if Ling Han did manage to get any treasure, based on his current ability, he would not be able to keep it. Sweat covered Ling Han's whole body. There was danger everywhere in this aura field. Years ago, when he was still in Heaven Tier, a single wrong step would mean severe injury for him, and with his current cultivation level of only the 6th layer of Element Gathering Tier now, this was practically trying to pull chestnuts out of a roaring fire. Any slightest bit of mistake could cost his life, and there were definitely no second chances. Yet this made him even more excited. He was completely focused, and his eyes were extremely bright. There was usually not much difference between a genius and a maniac. In his last life, he had put his focus on alchemy. Once he began to concoct alchemical pills, it would be as if he had transformed into a maniac, and this life, he had put his focus on martial arts, and so similarly also had one part of him that was a maniac, though he had not had a chance to display this part of him before. This kind of situation where danger was surrounding him on all sides caused his whole body to shiver, yet also made him even more excited. To be wavering between the boundaries of life and death allowed him to deeply feel the significance of life, and his divine sense was surging like oceanic waters. He even had a kind of feeling that perhaps this kind of dangerous place was the only way to train one's divine sense. The light from the treasured saber began to flicker, and Ling Han experienced a shock. The damage to this treasured saber was far worse than he had imagined. It had only withstood such a short while, and it looked like it was about to go out. Although he enjoyed taking risks, but taking risks and going straight to his death were two different things. He hurriedly sped up. As he had to calculate the changes within the aura field, his mind was extremely focused, and his mental energy was being expended at a very fast rate. The sweat covering his whole body was dripping down like water, and in a few short moments, had dampened all his clothes and even left behind traces of water underneath his steps. Yet it was as if he did not feel anything. His eyes were bright, and he continued to advance. When the treasured saber gave a final flicker and the light from all the seals vanished all at once, the seals shattering. This meant that the martial intent inside the treasured saber had been completely wiped out. Ling Han took a leap and charged out with a loud breath. He had finally managed to make his way out of the area that had been sealed in by the aura field. Light had again appeared in front of him. This was an area that was only about 100 feet in size. In the center, there was a corpse that was sitting in a cross-legged position on the ground, and that stalk of godly medicine was currently working hard on rooting itself into the ground. However, it seemed like the ground here was especially hard. Such a long time had passed, yet the stalk of godly medicine had only managed to insert half of its roots into the ground. Ling Han's eyes lit up, and he quietly approached the stalk of godly medicine. He did not know if there was a back and face to the godly medicine, but it was obvious that the stalk of godly medicine had not yet noticed that he was there. 10 steps, 8 steps, 5 steps, 3 steps. Ling Han suddenly leaped out, and stretched out a hand to grab that stalk of godly medicine. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 132. 3 Roots. The godly medicine was doing its best to dig its roots into the ground, and had not thought that anyone would have been able to suddenly break into the area sealed off by the aura field. Thus, it was completely caught unprepared by Ling Han, quickly pulling its roots out of the ground, ready to race off again. But this time, it was one step too late. Though its movements were indeed very quick, and it had already removed its roots from the ground, Ling Han's hand also managed to grab onto its roots. The godly medicine looked like it had experienced a huge fright. Even the flower that was blooming had instantly withdrawn all its petals, and even the stem was twisted and bent. But in the next instant, it suddenly started to struggle fiercely, and it actually flew out of his grasp. It scrambled into the area sealed off by the aura field, and in mere moments, had completely disappeared within the darkness. Ling Han was astounded. When he uncurled his fist and took a look, there were 3 torn-off roots left in his grip. There was a milky white liquid dripping from the torn-off ends of the roots, and all of a sudden, an indescribable refreshing fragrance filled the air, making his whole body relax. It was as if he was about to become as light as a feather and ascend to heaven. This was the godly medicine. How could Ling Han dare to waste it? He quickly stuck out his tongue to suck and lick clean that milky white liquid. Any single drop wasted would be an unforgivable sin. It's invigorating. So damn invigorating. Just a whiff of this godly medicine was enough to make him feel light as a feather and ready to ascend to heaven. Swallowing the several drops of liquid made this feeling even stronger, as if all the pores of his body were completely open and spiritual chi was automatically gushing in, nurturing his entire body. It was a feeling too amazing for mere words. His divine sense in particular had been greatly augmented, and his blood, flesh, nerves, and bones had all obtained a similar upgrade. His cultivation level, on the other hand, had increased the least. The value of the godly medicine is not in upgrading one's cultivation level. Ling Han thought. He expanded his divine sense and closely observed the changes taking place within his body. Vitality. This was the conclusion that he had come to. With the nurturing effects of the godly medicine, his body in its vitality had obtained a great upgrade. Any martial artist would know that a human being had a mere lifespan of about 100 years. Only if one managed to break through to flower blossom tier would they be able to break the restrictions of being mortal and gain another 200 years of life. Otherwise, even if they ate some kind of 1,000-year ginseng, it would only aid them in slowing down their aging process at most, and thus allow one to live for another few years. Why could a flower blossom tier martial artist obtain another 200 years of life? That was because the vitality within his body had been strengthened. After flower blossom tier, every breakthrough to a new tier would mean a new transformation, continuing to gain more and more life and vitality, and continuously increasing one's lifespan. Most importantly, there was a lapse after heaven tier. Since a heaven tier martial artist could reach shattering void tier, then the longest lifespan of a martial artist was limited to 1,000 years. A godly medicine could achieve the same kind of effect. He had just swallowed a few drops of the godly fluid, and Ling Han's life and vitality had obtained a great upgrade. As someone who had once been a powerful warrior of heaven tier, he could make a rough estimate. He had roughly gained an extra 20 years of life. 20 years. Just a few drops. If he had managed to swallow the whole stalk of godly medicine, how many extra years of life would he have been able to get? 1,000 years. That was the lowest estimate. That was equivalent to a powerful warrior of heaven tier getting another lifetime to live, and for mortals, that would be another 10 lifetimes. What was the most valuable thing in this world? It was not cultivation technique, martial arts technique, or wealth. It was life. That was another extra 1,000 years of life. This would be enough to drive powerful martial artists of heaven tier crazy. Ling Han stored the 3 roots of the godly medicine into the spatial ring. Increasing lifespan was one of the effects of the godly medicine, and naturally, was the greatest effect, but there were other uses for it, to reform the physical body, and thoroughly clear away the impurities accumulated in one's body. He had a heaven-grade spirit base, but this did not mean that his body was also heaven-grade. On the other hand, he had a very normal body. However, after he had begun cultivating the invincible heaven scroll, his physical body had ascended to the level of body a dead tree, and he was able to match those races with special constitution. In other words, his body was still very far from the level of perfection. At least, there were still 3 different levels ahead of him: body of rock cliff, body of iron sheet, and body of diamond. Moreover, this was only the first level of the invincible heaven scroll. Godly medicine can help one to improve one's physical body. Who knows, I may be able to use it to achieve body of rock cliff. Ling Han's eyes lit up. If he managed to learn body of rock cliff, not only would his defenses be even stronger than before, he would also be able to condense another 2 drops of indestructible true fluid. He would then have altogether 3 drops, so he would have even more trump cards in hand. It's too bad. If I had an intact stalk of godly medicine, I may be able to soar right up to body of iron sheet, or possibly even body of diamond. He could not help feeling very regretful, but he soon laughed in spite of himself. Then, he said to himself, a man can't be too greedy. In my last life, I did not see even a level 9 treasure, and now, at the mere level of the 6th layer of element gathering tier, I not only saw a level 10 godly medicine, I have even obtained 3 of its roots. If I am still unsatisfied with this, then I really deserve to be struck by lightning. He cast his eyes at that corpse sitting in the center. He had a feeling that this was the source of everything. This corpse had obviously experienced a great battle. At least more than 100 of his bones had been shattered. It was very hard to imagine how he could have managed to continue fighting when he had had so many of his bones broken. Ling Han slowly approached and took a closer look at it, and could not help becoming astonished. There were actually multiple golden characters on these bones. However, perhaps too much time had passed, or perhaps this person was too heavily injured, for these characters have all practically dimmed. However, this did not hinder Ling Han from feeling the might of these golden characters. Rather than saying these were written characters, it would be more appropriate to say they were part of a design that illustrated the powers of nature, and used these characters as a method of displaying them. Wait, Ling Han startled, the invincible heaven scroll is also like this, because I have no way to use mere words to recite it out. He came to a sudden understanding. No wonder he had needed 10,000 years just to comprehend the first level of cultivation technique. That was because it had far surpassed the level of mere words, and had reached a whole new level. However, although I have only taken one look, I can confirm that these golden characters on the bones are no match for the invincible heaven scroll. The complexity level of the 2 were completely different. But I can definitely conclude that this is the corpse of a powerful warrior of shattering void tier. If I am able to pry apart even a single shred of his martial intent, it would definitely be very beneficial to me when I break through to shattering void tier in the future. Ling Han said to himself. He widened his eyes, intending to memorize these golden characters. Hong! A red flame suddenly gushed out of the skeleton. It was dazzlingly bright, and there was a wave of heat that surged from it, causing Ling Han to take a few steps back. A red-colored flame floated above the skeleton, and formed into various shapes, as if it had its own life. A strange fire, Ling Han gasped out in surprise. Strange fire was a very strange substance born from nature. It could also be described as a type of energy, and it was indescribably valuable to martial artists and alchemists alike, for once a martial artist refined the strange fire, he could refine his own physical body, raise his cultivation level, or even develop some fire-type martial arts technique, and if an alchemist fused with the strange fire, he would get a great advantage when concocting alchemical pills. Why? Because the most important thing in concocting alchemical pills was fire control. However, a martial artist had limited power, so the heat of the flames one could produce was extremely limited, but the strange fire could increase this limit by a considerable number of times and allow an alchemist to gain much more room to exercise his abilities. For example, for Ling Han, based on his ability, he could concoct alchemical pills as high as heaven grade. However, due to the limitations of his cultivation level, he could not do so because he was unable to produce flames with such a high level of heat to heat his alchemy furnace. But, if he were to fuse with a strange fire, then while concocting heaven-grade alchemical pills would still be impossible, there was a great possibility that he would be able to concoct earth-grade alchemical pills. Even if it was not possible for him now, by the time he broke through to Gushing Spring tier, he should be about able to. Instantly, his eyes lit up. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 133, Fusion. Ling Han's only feeling now was that his luck in this life was unbelievably, illogically great. In his last life, although he was an ultimate warrior of heaven tier, whether it was the godly medicine or the strange fire, he had not even managed to see either of them. But in this life, he was only in the 6th layer of element gathering tier and he has already seen both these extremely rare items, and had even managed to obtain 3 roots of the godly medicine. If he could also manage to make this strange fire his own, Ling Han's heartbeat sped up in spite of himself. The strange fire could allow him to concoct alchemical pills of a higher grade than he could at his current cultivation level. The extremely high heat of the strange fire could also become one of the hidden cards up his sleeve. He was a bit curious now. How did this strange fire come to be? One has to know that there are many types of strange fires, but there was a need to meet certain requirements for each type to form. The most common type of strange fire was of course those born in the depths of a volcano, but there were also some special types of strange fires that were born within cold places, or even within freezing ice. These were known as flames of ice, and they had the ability to freeze living things to death. But what about this place? Ling Han could not think of any conditions here that would induce the birth of a strange fire, aside from this corpse in front of him. This corpse had been an ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier when he was alive. Could it be that an ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier was even able to form strange fires? Ling Han pondered in his thoughts, though his eyes were still fixed upon that strange fire wavering in front of him, thinking of how he might be able to make the strange fire his own. If he still had the cultivation level of heaven tier, then there would naturally be no problem. He would only need to dominate it by force. But with his current cultivation level of the 6th layer of element gathering tier, if he dared to attempt to take it by force, the most likely scenario would be being burnt to ashes. Little fire, come, come, come. You'll stay with me from now on. Ling Han acted like he was calling over a little puppy. The strange fire continued to morph into various shapes, and ignored him completely. That was natural. How could the strange fire be able to understand human language? Ling Han gritted his teeth. If he used divine sense, he would be able to skip over using mere words to communicate with the strange fire, but the problem was, did he dare to use his divine sense to come into contact with that strange fire? The might of the strange fire was more than enough to completely burn his divine sense to ashes. At least, the first level of cultivation technique of the Invincible Heaven Scroll did not include a method to heal one's divine sense. But, to just give up the strange fire like this was not something he could do. He thought furiously, and suddenly came up with an idea. Could he ask the Black Tower for help? He had a feeling that the level of the Black Tower was above even this ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier, so it should be able to dominate over this strange fire. The problem was that although the Black Tower was currently staying in his body, it definitely had the character of a boss, and usually more or less ignored him. Would it actually help him? Let's give it a try. He used his divine sense to move the Black Tower, yet Master Black was completely unmoved, and ignored him. Ling Han was not the slightest bit discouraged, and continued to use his divine sense to harass the Black Tower. He had already witnessed it once before. The Black Tower was not an inanimate object. Finally, the Black Tower gave a light quiver, and emitted a shock wave. He did not feel anything from this shock wave, but there appeared even more shattered seals on the bones of the corpse, completely unable to withstand the shock wave from the Black Tower. The strange fire looked like it was a little girl that had received a huge fright. It suddenly shrank into itself, and was trembling. Ling Han's heart moved, and beckoned the strange fire over. A surprising scene happened. The strange fire actually leaped into his hand. What was even more surprising was the fact that Ling Han did not feel any bit of scalding heat on his hand. The strange fire indeed had its own spirit. Ling Han bravely communicated with the strange fire, using his divine sense to transmit his thoughts over, and said, "Little guy, you stay with me from now on, and I will find even more strange fires, and let you all fuse together to finally become the most powerful flame of this world." Using divine sense to transmit ideas was a communication method that surpassed the limitations of language and race. Any existence with consciousness would be able to understand. Yi-ya-ya, yi-ya-ya. The strange fire transmitted a blurry thought, like it was an infant just learning how to speak, so it was very indistinct. Ling Han finally understood. Though this strange fire had developed its own consciousness, its intelligence was too low, as if it was a newborn baby. Kids should be very easily duped, right? Ling Han emitted a kind aura, allowing the strange fire enough time to think things through. In truth, he was not lying. In the future, if he encountered a strange fire again, he would definitely make a move and continue to fuse the strange fires he managed to obtain together, increasing the might of the strange fire. In this world, all living creatures have an instinctive desire to become stronger and closer to perfection. The strange fire was no exception. It was unable to cultivate, but it was able to fuse with other strange fires to increase its own intelligence and might. Ling Han did not rush things, and continued to communicate with the strange fire. He had the confidence that the strange fire would eventually agree, because the Black Tower had just displayed its might, allowing the strange fire to feel that he was a man with power. A talented person would choose a good master to serve, as the saying goes. The intelligence of the strange fire was still at a simple level, and could be described as extremely innocent. Thus, if there was a need for it to choose a master, then the first thing it would consider would be the strength of its master. It was all right even if Ling Han's cultivation level wasn't very high, as long as the Black Tower was awesome enough. Yi-ya-ya, yi-ya-ya. The strange fire transmitted blurry thoughts and all of a sudden, disappeared into Ling Han's palm, and like a drop of water sinking into sand, it was immediately absorbed and entered Ling Han's body. Ling Han had never obtained a strange fire before, but in his last life, he had managed to acquire the correct method on how to refine and absorb it, and so was not unfamiliar with the next step. Now that the strange fire was in his body, he had two choices. The first choice was to refine the strange fire and erase its intelligence, transforming it into pure energy to nurture and strengthen himself. The second was to fuse with the strange fire and preserve its intelligence, something like making his body the new residence of the strange fire. For a martial artist, they would definitely choose the first option without any bit of hesitation. But how could Ling Han break his word, even if it was one given to a strange fire? Moreover, he still needed to concoct alchemical pills, so naturally, the best option was to preserve the strange fire intact. He fused with the strange fire, and the little guy was coiled in Ling Han's left hand, fusing with Ling Han's soul. The Black Tower lightly trembled, possessing the might to dominate over everything, allowing the process to be exceptionally smooth. After a mere half an hour, the fusion process was complete. Ling Han's eyes snapped open. He stretched open his left hand, and a raging red flame burnt upon his palm. Yet this was not something powered by his origin power, but rather came from the strange fire. Yi-ya-ya. The strange fire also emitted delighted thoughts, seeming to be very pleased with Ling Han's body. Go. Ling Han waved his left hand, and the strange fire instantly left his hand. With a mental command from him, it began to continuously dance and move around on the ground. He beckoned his hand again, and the strange fire flew back to him and once again disappeared into his left hand. Ha 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 ha, now my battle prowess has gotten another upgrade. With the raging flames of the strange fire, I'd be able to kill even spiritual ocean tier martial artists, what more mere gushing spring tier. However, how to get near them is a problem. No one would be foolish enough to allow the strange fire to get near them. However, if I allow the strange fire to coil around my fists, or around the blade of my sword, then when others underestimate me due to their own carelessness, there is a real possibility I'd be able to kill them right on the spot. Hee hee, then let's just see who would be so unfortunate. Ling Han looked once more at the corpse. Due to the several shock waves emanating from the Black Tower, more and more broken seals were appearing on the bones, and the golden characters were no longer identifiable, making him feel a strong regret. That was the martial intent of a powerful warrior of Shattering Void tier. Forget it, forget it. I'm being too greedy, Ling Han said. My gains this time are already indescribably colossal, and what use would the martial intent of an ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier be to me now? I am able to soar smoothly all the way to Heaven tier in the first place. Now the problem is, how do I get out of here? Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 134. Return. When Ling Han looked at the corpse, a speculation appeared in his heart. Years ago, Jiang Yue Feng and so many other elite warriors of Heaven tier were ganging up on this ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier, and the final result should be that neither side won and everyone died. However, the ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier was too powerful. Even after his death, he managed to create a forbidden zone that no one could enter. After 10,000 years, even the martial intent of a Shattering Void tier martial artist would weaken, and in a sudden earthquake that revealed the underground river, various spiritual tools floated out on the waters of this underground river, and finally managed to tempt him to this place. Ling Han did not know who this ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier had been when he was alive, but he fully trusted his disciple. Since Jiang Yue Feng took part in this battle royal, then this ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier must have committed heinous crimes. If he wanted to leave this place, it was simple. Because the source of all the restrictions in this place was the martial intent of this ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier, then as long as he managed to erase this person's martial intent, then everything in this place would naturally return to how it used to be. For others, erasing the martial intent of an ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier was absolutely impossible. However, for Ling Han, this would only be a slight effort on his part. After all, the source of the martial intent was this skeletal corpse, and now that this skeleton was about to collapse, he would be able to turn it completely into dust as long as he exerted a bit of effort. Under normal conditions, Ling Han would naturally not do something like destroying someone else's remains, but this guy was very possibly a man that was wicked beyond redemption. Ling Han did not hesitate for a moment and delivered a single kick. Pow! The skeleton that was already fractured in many places in the first place instantly collapsed, and all the golden characters carved on it transformed into an invisible energy that surged out in all directions. Changes were immediately obvious. At first, Ling Han was not able to see anything outside the aura field, but now that the martial intent of the Shattering Void tier warrior was completely gone, the aura field had also vanished without a trace. Thus, his sight was no longer hampered in any way. Ling Han, Lu Yutong and Li Xichan cried out in surprise at the same time. Ling Han's eyes cast a look around, yet found that only the two of them were there. There was no sign of any of the others. He was stunned at first, but then swiftly understood. The godly medicine had ran out earlier on, and so must have attracted a lot of people to chase after it. Thus, there was naturally no one else here. I've made you wait. He nodded at the two girls. The two girls gave a reserved smile in response. In truth, the two of them had been very worried about him before, but they did not have such thick skin to so openly display their anxiety. Let's go. The three of them went back the way they came, yet they had only walked for a short while before feeling a very powerful aura press down on them. Li Zhangyi and the other old monsters had appeared. The remains of the ultimate warrior of Shattering Void tier had been destroyed, so the light of God had also disappeared. There was nothing left to deny these old monsters entry. These old monsters swiftly passed them by. No matter how highly they thought of Ling Han, they would never think that the disappearance of the light of God had anything to do with this young man. They all had their attention focused on that stalk of godly medicine, and so of course would not have the time to waste on chit-chat with Ling Han. Ziu, 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 their figures soared, and were soon very far away. Godly medicine, they had no hope of getting their hands on it. Or so Ling Han thought. That godly medicine was level 10, and though it was not very powerful by itself, the speed at which it could escape was incredible. Even if he still had the cultivation level of his last life, he would have to expend a lot of effort to capture it. The reason why he had been able to succeed in catching hold of it just now had been because there was still the aura field of the ultimate warrior of Shattering Void Tear pressing down on it, slowing it down. Additionally, that stalk of godly medicine had also been careless, and had not expected there would be anyone who might be able to enter the aura field. There was no longer any value left in this place, so Ling Han chose to leave without any hesitation. However, there was still a few questions that were left unanswered in his heart. Why had there suddenly appeared an ultimate warrior of Shattering Void Tier 10,000 years ago? Why had so many Heaven Tier elites suddenly appeared? And what unforgivable crime had this Shattering Void Tier martial artist committed that caused him to be ganged up on by so many Heaven Tier martial artists, which eventually led to their mutual demise? No matter how hard he thought, he could find no answer to any of these questions. Perhaps, this would remain an unanswered mystery forever. Ling Han regained his composure. This time, he had managed to gain 3 treasures, a spatial ring, 3 roots of the godly medicine, and a strange fire. The spatial ring was all right, but the latter 2 treasures were items that even he in last life would covet furiously. What a colossal reward! On their way out, they naturally saw a lot of the others searching all around for the godly medicine. Ling Han did not stop at any moment, of course. He decided to return once they had made their way out of the underground river. Ziu, the 3 of them had just stepped onto the river bank, and they immediately saw that stalk of godly medicine run past them. It passed them by swiftly and instantly disappeared into the distance. Ziu, ziu, ziu. Li Zhangyi and the other old monsters soon appeared, hot on its heels. All of them looked extremely furious. Obviously, they had been played by that stalk of godly medicine. Ling Han could not help but smile. Now that the light of God in this place had disappeared, that stalk of godly medicine had lost this natural protection, so it would of course not be staying in this place anymore. Most probably, it would never return here again. However, his guess was that this stalk of godly medicine wouldn't leave Rain Country either. When he had once again reached Heaven Tier, he could come back here to look around. Who knows, he might be able to obtain this stalk of godly medicine. After the light of God had disappeared, the level 9 spiritual tools all left the underground space at a quicker rate. There was no way to obtain those that still retained their spirit, and there was not much value in getting those without spirit. Ling Han did not want to continue staying here, so after asking the 2 girls for their opinion, the 3 of them returned to the Imperial City together. When Wu Songlin saw that Ling Han had returned so quickly, he could not help feeling very surprised. But, at the same time, he also breathed out a sigh in relief because for an old man like him, taking care of the 2 little girls was indeed a headache-inducing task, who knew was too wild, so he could not hand her over to be taken care of by servants. The only option left was for him to take care of her, and babysitting her for a mere few days was enough torment to cause him to lose a few pounds of weight. Ling. When Hu Niu spotted Ling Han, she instantly pounced on him and hung herself from Ling Han's shoulders, her little face bearing an overjoyed grin. Ling Han could not help but laugh. It was really rare to hear this little girl not say, "Meat," looks like she had indeed missed him. However, he had barely completed this thought before hearing Hu Niu exclaim, "Meat. Meat. Meat." Fine. The deep-set character of a glutton was difficult to change. "Let's go eat meat." He picked Hu Niu up, while his other hand held onto Ling Zixuan, and left with the 2 little girls in tow. Lu Yutong naturally followed him, but Li Xichan could not be so willful. She could only reluctantly stay behind to assist Wu Songlin because Wu Songlin had just recently achieved a new level of comprehension and intended to concoct a type of black-grade high-level alchemical pill. If things went smoothly, he would attempt to concoct an earth-grade alchemical pill. The ingredients necessary for the concoction of an earth-grade alchemical pill were too expensive. Every time the furnace exploded, it meant a colossal waste of resources. Even a high-ranking person like Wu Songlin dared not begin the concoction process so easily. He needed to have a certain level of confidence that the furnace would not explode. This was also one of the reasons why there was no earth-grade alchemist in Rain Country. Due to there not being enough chances to try concocting earth-grade alchemical pills, how could it be possible that anyone would succeed in becoming an earth-grade alchemist? Of course, this was also related to the environment in Rain Country, where earth-grade ingredients were unbelievably expensive. However, in bigger places, although earth-grade ingredients were still very valuable, their value was not to the extent in Rain Country. Heaven-grade ingredients were the really priceless ingredients there. Ling Han carried Hu Niu while Lu Yutong held onto Ling Zixuan's hand. The four of them went and had a great feast at a restaurant. It was all on the tab of the third imperial prince anyways, so money was no issue. After they had their fill, Lu Yutong and Ling Zixuan left. They had their own accommodations. Moreover, Ling Zixuan also needed to cultivate, so how could she keep clinging onto Ling Han? After Ling Han had returned to his own courtyard, he took out a root of the godly medicine and prepared to refine it. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao. Chapter 135, thoroughly clearing away the filth in the body. He was a little loath to part with it. Ling Han did not immediately refine it. This kind of a godly medicine had the life-saving abilities of growing flesh on bones and reviving a dead man. For him to simply refine it like this, he really felt a bit hesitant to make a move. However, this was only a moment's hesitation. He had already learnt body a dead tree, and thus had condensed a single drop of indestructible true fluid. This had the incredible effect of saving his life. Although its effects were a bit weaker when compared with the godly medicine, it had the advantage of being able to be condensed again after being used. Moreover, as long as he managed to learn the body of rock cliff of the invincible heaven scroll, he would be able to condense another 2 drops of the indestructible true fluid. There would be no more godly medicine once it was eaten, while the indestructible true fluid could be continuously condensed. It was obvious which one was more profitable. Additionally, the godly medicine could give his physical body a complete upgrade, strengthening his core and banking up his origin power. These were all solid benefits for him. Ling Han did not lack comprehension of cultivation. What he lacked was time, and the godly medicine could compensate for his lack of time very well. In this life, luck is on my side. Ling Han tossed the root of the godly medicine into his mouth. One bite, and he could feel a strong fragrance spread out in his mouth, and there was a light, airy feeling in his whole body, as if he would be flying at any moment. Invigorating. He continued to circulate the invincible heaven scroll while directing the medicinal effects to spread into every part of his body. Changes were immediately apparent. He could clearly feel his cells strengthening, his bones becoming sturdier, and the blood flowing in his veins becoming more energetic, as if there was an ultimate warrior thoroughly clearing away all the filth accumulated in his body. Very soon, a black layer of filth appeared on his body. This black layer was made up of the impurities accumulated in his body which, with the effects of the godly medicine, were now forced out of his body. Don't underestimate this. When a martial artist cultivated, that was a process of upgrading one's physical body. When he reached flower blossom tier, there would be a change in the nature of his body, casting off his mortal body and evolving into a higher level of existence. Just like a rock that, with continuous grinding and refining, slowly becomes a beautiful piece of jade. Forcing out the impurities in one's body was equivalent to refining oneself, and speeding up the process of transforming into jade. This change was very slight, but the effects were extremely obvious. Ling Han could immediately feel the spiritual qi entering his body was obviously circulating faster than before. That was natural. Since the impurities in his veins have decreased, spiritual chi could flow throughout his body at a faster pace. And that was not the only benefit. Now that the circulation of spiritual chi had become faster, when he began circulating origin power in future, it would also be a faster process than before. What it meant was clear. The faster origin power was being circulated, the greater the destructive power behind his blows. This was a solid upgrade. His life and vitality were continuously becoming stronger, and there was also a certain level of upgrade to his divine sense, making him experience the feeling of having a clear head. When he pondered, his thoughts were forming at a faster pace and were clearer than before. Exhilarating, exhilarating, exhilarating. After about half a day, he had completely refined the root of the godly medicine. What a pity that there is practically no increase to my cultivation level. Ling Han sighed, but it was all right. Previously, he had taken advantage of the opportunity and embezzled the resources provided by the imperial family of Rain Country as well as the 8 great clans to concoct a large amount of alchemical pills that could help him increase his cultivation level, so he was not missing out. He took out the second root of the godly medicine, swallowed it, and continued the refining process. Hong long long. This time, he could sense a thunderous noise within his body, as every bone was groaning and crashing one into another. This time, the effects of the medicine had gone even deeper, and it was stimulating a great change within the bones of his body. This was not so exhilarating. On the other hand, the remolding of his bones was an agonizing process, as if his whole body was being shattered to be rebuilt once more. The pain caused him to suck on his teeth, and sweat poured down like rain from his body. He released a series of low groans. Peng, peng, peng. Very quickly, there was a banging on the door. It was Hu Niu who had heard his moans of pain and had thus come to check up on him. I'm fine, Ling Han said through gritted teeth. Peng. But it was obviously completely pointless to say this to Hu Niu. The violent nature of the little girl had activated, as she crashed in. After rolling around on the ground once, she looked at Ling Han simple-mindedly. When she saw that he was still able to sit in a cross-legged position, though he had sweated a lot, she immediately bared her teeth in a grin. What a heartless little girl. Ling Han did not have the time to bother with her at the moment. The invincible heaven scroll continued to circulate and his body was still absorbing the effects of the medicine to remold the bones in his body. The agony surged continuously like oceanic waters, crashing into him so hard that he felt like he could faint at any moment. But if he actually lost consciousness, he would not be able to circulate the invincible heaven scroll anymore, so the effects of the medicine could only circulate throughout his body instinctively and without any conscious guidance from him. In that case, the effects would naturally be much weaker. Most importantly, he wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to force his body all the way up to Body of Rock Cliff. That meant that he needed to circulate the invincible Heaven Scroll and absorb the effects of the medicine based on the secret arts in the Heaven Scroll. I shall endure it, endure it, endure it, endure it. Ling Han gritted his teeth. Veins were popping up on his head and his neck. There soon appeared a puddle of water on the spot he was seated at, and it seemed as if he had just been fished out of the water as both his eyes looked a bit empty. He was also eating godly medicine this time, yet why was there such disparity between the first and second time? Ling Han let his thoughts run wild to distract him from the agony he was experiencing. He thought about his father who was still in Grey Cloud Town. He also thought about Lu Yutong and Li Si-chan. He even thought about his last life. He did not know how much time had passed, but that strong feeling of agony finally began to weaken, eventually completely disappearing. Ling Han breathed out a long sigh of relief. Just now, he had even had the thought of giving up, but thankfully, he had persevered. He looked down at his body. Impurities had also been forced out this time, but they were not black in color, but rather white. These were the impurities from within his bones, thoroughly clearing out the filth in body. It did live up to its name. The first portion of the godly medicine improved his body and flesh, and the second portion refined his bones, then what about the third portion? Ling Han breathed out and took out the third portion of the godly medicine. Smells nice. Smells nice. Hu Niu immediately pounced over, her eyes fixed upon the godly medicine, saliva merely dripping out of her mouth. Little girl, you haven't begun cultivating yet, so it would be too wasteful for you to eat this. Moreover, the medicinal effects are too strong, and you'll get constipated, Ling Han said with a laugh. Eat. Hu Niu grabbed Ling Han's arm and tugged repeatedly, acting like a spoiled child. No. Ling Han shook his head firmly. There was no use acting pitiful. Hu Niu stretched out her little head, and gave a strong struggle, aiming a bite at the godly medicine. She had struggled too strongly, and Ling Han actually lost his grip on her in a moment of carelessness. Her mouth had bitten onto the godly medicine. Oh no. If it was bitten by this glutton, then there wouldn't even be scraps left behind. Indeed, he immediately felt a little tongue licking at his hand. That was Hu Niu, who had still not had enough and was gnawing at his hand like it was a chicken's leg. This prodigal child. Ling Han sighed. That was godly medicine, and he had in total only obtained 3 portions, yet 1 portion was actually wasted on this little girl. She. Hu Niu turned back around and gave him a large grin. When Ling Han saw this, he couldn't manage to get angry even if he wanted to. Who asked him to cry out so horribly just now and alert this little girl? When it came down to it, the little girl had barged in because she had been worried about him after all. Forget it. Hopefully, you can withstand such powerful medicinal effects. Ling Han sighed and carried the little girl out. He was in desperate need of a bath. There was filth covering his whole body, so much that he felt horrible just from smelling it. After taking a bath, Ling Han took a look inside his body and revealed a satisfied smile when he saw the results. His body had obtained a great upgrade this time round. Though he had yet to reach the level of body of rock cliff, his bones had become as strong as steel, and his skin had become tougher too. It should not be too far to go before he reached body of rock cliff. Most importantly, there was a huge upgrade to his life and vitality. He only felt full of energy, and so no matter what he did, he felt full of enthusiasm. The next morning, Ling Han vaguely felt that something was a bit off. When he thought things over, he finally realized something. Hu Niu had not awakened yet. Usually, by this time, the little girl would be awake, clinging to him and yelling out her, "Meat, meat, meat." End of the chapter. Alchemy Emperor of the Divine Tao will be read in 5 chapters for every Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Sunday. Please leave this sound novel and press subscribe, follow, and the bell so you don't miss any new clips as well. See you.